Hello everyone, my name is Karen Gall and I am the Vice President Secretary of the Canadian Multicultural Education Foundation, or as we call ourselves, CMEF. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are located on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional lands of First Nations and Métis. Edmonton is and has been home to diverse Indigenous nations and peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Tsuut'ina, Inuit, and many others. They have called these lands home since time immemorial. As a multicultural organization, CMEF acknowledges the Treaty 6 land and territories of our First Nations. This is a reminder to us to continue learning about Indigenous communities, creating meaningful relationships with them, and promoting recognition of their history, languages, and traditions. This is our commitment to action. The Canadian Multicultural Education Foundation is a not-for-profit organization founded in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada on October 1st, 1990. Our mandate is to strengthen the multicultural fabric of Canada through educational and community programs. I am proud to say that CMEF has steadfastly developed and offered innovative programs in response to emerging needs and realities. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our New Horizons Seniors Project, featuring videos developed and produced collaboratively during the COVID-19 pandemic by an intergenerational and multicultural team of seniors and youth for seniors and youth. This project has been made possible by the support of the Government of Canada's New Horizons for Seniors program. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, my name is Vasant Chotai and I'm moderator of today's presentation. Immigrating to Canada from Kenya, where I was a high school science teacher, I pursued undergraduate degree in psychology and graduate studies in policy planning. I have 29 years of experience with the government of Alberta, where I was director of social policy and led a team of research staff. I initiated cross-ministry coordination on social programs and a policy advisory body consisting of community leaders, businesses, academics, and senior government officials. I was policy expert to the MLA Committee to review low-income programs that developed a new model for support low-income Albertans, crossing program and ministerial boundaries. I'm currently president of the Canadians for Civil Society. Recently, I have lost 3 brothers, 2 brothers-in-law, and a sister-in-law due to age and ill health. So this topic is of particular interest to me. Another coordinator with me, his name is Eric Au. And Eric Au is the second moderator at today's session. Eric is a first-year neuroscience student at the University of Alberta who is interested in mental health. He is involved in the Chinese community, leading the Chinese Benevolent Association Youth Council and working with many different generations in the community, giving him experience in communicating across generational divides. Eric has experienced loss in his life, being born with 7 grandparents, and is interested to learn how older generations experience loss and how they can be supported. We also have 2 seniors as guests today. Len Chen Marcus has a master's in education from the University of Alberta and currently works at the university. Len keeps herself active in a volunteer for more than 2 decades in Chinese community and on several non-profit boards. She's busy in the role of place keeper by showcasing and documenting the history and heritage of Edmonton's Chinatown, where she grew up as an immigrant child. In early summer this year, Lan's mother passed away sadly due to health reasons and not from COVID-19. Furthermore, she experienced the loss of many Chinese seniors in the seniors facilities where she's board of director. Burl Scott is the second senior guest today. Burl Scott is president of Canadian Multicultural Education Foundation. She's a retired nurse and a British-trained midwife. During her working life and at present, she's remained an active volunteer in non-profit organizations. She was a board member of the United Nurses of Alberta. Burl has lost 2 members of her immediate family to COVID. Now I will present today's speaker. The topic of the discussion today is loss and hope, finding hope in the second half of life. Our keynote speaker today is Dr. Wendy Edey, who is a registered psychologist. She is a counseling psychologist who has spent the past 26 years studying hope across the lifespan. Wendy is known for her pioneering work in the use of hope language and symbols in counseling practice. She has an honorary doctorate from St. Stephen's College and is a member of the adjunct faculty at the University of Alberta. Her workshops and presentations display her love of humor and storytelling. Now retired and recently widowed, Wendy often finds herself turning to the important lessons she learned in hope studies. But the second half of life presents us with the challenge of staying hopeful. We know that hope enables us to be happier and make healthier choices. But how can we find hope in the second half of life? Now I present Dr. Wendy Edey. Wendy.
Thank you very much for that introduction. A couple of things I should say just at the beginning. My doctorate is totally an honorary doctorate. I really have a master's degree, so calling me Wendy would be just a fine thing to do. But I also can say that I must be one of the luckiest people going, because accidentally at midlife, when I was about 40, I had the chance to take one road or another road. One road would have been into private practice as a psychologist when I finished my master's degree. And the second road was over into the area of hope studies. And at that time, no one really knew what a career as a counselor in hope studies would be like. But the University of Alberta had an opportunity for that, and we had the good mentorship of Dr. Rana Jevni, who had been writing and studying about hope as the head of psychology at the cancer clinic here in Edmonton. So I had the opportunity then to design and to learn, along with my colleagues, what it would be like to be counseling people from the perspective of hope. And that gave me the chance to counsel people of many different ages, different cultures, and people with problems that I did not know how to solve. Because you see, we don't really need hope much, do we, when things are going well? Hope is there, but we don't really think about hope. When we start to think about it is when things are going badly. And that's when we think, what hope is there? And how can I have hope? So we certainly do know that in the second half of life, people are going, just by the fact that we are older, people are going to experience more losses. Our friends are older. The generation above us is older. And we have more time in life for things to go wrong. But we also have more time in life for things to go right. And as we age, as we move across the lifespan from younger to older, we have more time in the past and less time in the future. And as we move across cultures, we find that people speak of hope in different ways, in different languages, but yet they still feel hope. So what is hope that we're talking about right now? Perhaps I can start by talking about choosing hope. So on choosing to be hopeful, some days I'm hopeful, other days not so much, but it's the same world on any given day, regardless of how hopeful I am. Only the things that I will do are different. Being hopeful is not wishing. Wishing is for Disneyland and birthday candles, and when I buy a lottery ticket with a very small chance of winning. Being hopeful is not goal setting. Goal setting is for fundraisers and your performance appraisal at work. Hope is a way of feeling, like when I believe that the future can be good, but I don't really have a plan for how to make it so. When I am not hopeful, I think there are no possibilities. When I am hopeful, I'm willing to accept the idea that they might be. And it's better to be hopeful than not to be. But some days I can't be hopeful. And on those days, I just have to wait until I can. So what is hope anyway? Well, many people define hope differently depending on the thing they're studying. But in the shortest and simplest possible terms, hope is a positive orientation to life. It allows us to think about the future and be okay in the present. Think about the future and be okay in the present. So when we're already expecting a good future, as younger people often are expecting a good future, because even if we don't know that it's going to be good, it's going to be long. When we're expecting a good future, then we can be okay in the present without so much trouble. As we age and we see what's coming for us in the future, maybe not this continuous acceleration of better and better health, maybe not the longer and longer lives of our parents and our aunts and uncles and our friends and our most dearly beloved spouses. When we see that kind of future, then as we think of a foundation for us to have hope, we have to look more to the past, to the things that have shown us the way in the past, and accept that it may still be possible to have hope as we age, but perhaps we will hope for different things. At this point, I want to introduce an idea that was introduced to me by a teenager. We used to talk in academic circles about threats to hope and challenges to hope, barriers to hope, things that keep hope away, things that make hope impossible. This young man in a grade 8 class drew a picture of something that takes hope away. Now, the picture that he drew looked like an insect. In fact, it looked like something that we often find in lakes when we're swimming. It looked like a bloodsucker. But the young man in question said, "What I have drawn is a hope sucker." And so normally we just go along, we maybe have hope, we don't really think about hope, and then something comes along and goes and sucks all that hope right out of us. Maybe that hope sucker is the loss of a dear friend or of a parent, might be the loss of a job, or maybe the loss of a country if a person has had to move, or a whole way of life. The things that are bad that have happened to us, they do come along and suck out our hope when we aren't even expecting it. might be health challenges, or our failure to achieve something that we really thought we would, like a satisfying career, or a good income that recognizes our education. It's because we have hope suckers, and even bigger hope suckers like depression that we can't always control. But it's because we have hope suckers that it is valuable sometimes to take some time to focus on hope, to think and talk about hope, to see how we might find it at the same time that we're experiencing loss, to see how we might be able to think of the future, accepting the past in which we have learned something about losses, and still be okay in the present to go forward in a hopeful way. My own personal challenges around hope have from time to time come face to face with me, my own personal hope suckers. I was born as a blind person, so my whole life I've had to figure out how to live with that as a disability that couldn't be fixed. And sometimes things haven't gone all that well with my family. About 20 years ago, my mother died, and she died younger than we expected. She was only 78, and we had thought of her as living much longer than that. Then in more recent years, my husband developed a very serious and fatal illness called multiple systems atrophy. And for a number of years, we had to keep asking ourselves, what is the best way that we can live a hopeful life, knowing that his disabilities are going to increase no matter what we do? So I do understand the challenges of having hope when things aren't going well, when we can't fix absolutely everything, when we can't just set a goal and make that happen. These are challenges that I understand. And I said at the beginning of this presentation that maybe I'm one of the luckiest people going, because I had behind me to face these challenges a career in hope studies, in really looking at how people across the world and across the lifespan have been able to think about and find hope in the most challenging of circumstances, and thousands of conversations that I've had with people in my counseling office, both in groups and individually, because hope is something that we can find more easily if we choose to notice it, if we choose to look for it, if we know how to talk and think about it. And I think that's really the gist of what I want to say as introductory remarks. And I know that from a previous conversation that Eric and Vincent have been thinking about hope as well in the context of being younger or older and across the lifespan. And so I'd like to open an opportunity to the two of you, Eric and Vincent, to see what you might want to ask about this.
Thank you very much, Wendy, for going over those things. My first question for you has to do with my personal experience. So it wasn't in my introduction, but I'll tell you guys now. My father passed away this June a few months ago. And since then, my whole family, he was 53, and my grandfather is still alive at 85. And so it's been an experience to kind of share that with him and interact with him over that, when I wasn't expecting to lose my dad at 18, but he definitely wasn't expecting to ever have to lose his son. So my question for you is, what can younger people and older people do to share their grief experiences and support each other after losing a loved one? And how can members of my generation bring hope to older friends and relatives and support them as they age?
Well, this is a really good question, I think. So, how can we talk to each other about these things across generations, and how can we help each other across generations. So it may seem cliched to you, but one thing that older people do tend to acquire, whether they wanted to or not, is the kind of wisdom that comes with age. So older people, just by virtue of having more experience, both bad and good experience, they tend to know more things than younger people do. Younger people, on the other hand, have that experience of optimism that comes with youth. I can remember when I was in my teens thinking that, we could speak Esperanto, one language, just one language in the world. Everyone could learn it, and then we wouldn't have any of this difficulty of understanding languages. And to me, that was the one solution. And it was based on a kind of optimism, a naive optimism that I had, that number one, everybody would be able to learn a new language. Number two, everybody would be willing to learn a language. And number three, that people would find that their old language was less important to them than talking to people across the world. I was very young and optimistic and naive, and yet my naivety was kind of aiming me in a good direction, because even though I hate to say this, but I didn't convince the world to learn Esperanto so that we could all talk to each other better. But I did convince myself that it was more important for me to learn to listen to others and somehow understand what they might have to tell me. So the first and most important way that people of any age can learn from each other is to simply express an interest, to be interested in others. And generally we express an interest by asking questions of others, by listening to others. After my mother died, one day it occurred to me to ask my father how he felt. Now, this might seem a very simple thing, but I was telling other people how he was doing. They would say, well, how's your dad doing? And I would say, well, he's doing quite well. He's learning how to cook. He's learning how to use the laundry. He's learning how to do all these things that my mother used to do. And he seems to be coping quite well. But I didn't really ever get interested in what it was like for him to be living in his house alone. And so one day I remembered to do what I would have done in counseling, which was simply to ask him. And he said to me, surprisingly, because I had never heard him use such a word before, he said, "It's really quite lonely." So being interested in others and asking them questions that the answers might seem obvious is the first way that we can support each other and learn from each other and comfort each other across the generations. Because nothing comforts us more than having other people be interested in us, not to boss us around, but just to be interested in how we feel, what we think. Younger people can ask older people, what have you learned so far in your life about how to cope with this pain? I'm really hurting. I'm really missing Grandma. What do you know about that? How have you gotten through that in the past? Did you ever lose anyone that you really missed? And older people also can do this for those who are younger. The best way that we can support each other across generations is to be interested in the experience of others, to ask them what we want to know instead of assuming that we do know what they're going through, and to be brave about it. Be really brave, not be afraid that they're going to say something that we can't deal with, not be afraid of their sadness, but just to ask them very simply how it's going for them. I think that interest is the most important thing we can do in supporting getting through grief and coming to a time of hope after a loss. I think that's all I have to say on that subject at this moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. That's very inspiring discussion. In the news, we hear all the bad stuff that's happening all over the world. Sometimes we hear some good stuff happening. So, for example, shooting in the United States recently in a school. We hear about climate change and the negative effect it's going to have on lots of people across the world. And we hear about the economy, and people feel depressed. Now, how can you have hope when people around you are negative about everything? What do you do?
Well, people around you being negative about everything is certainly something that we have to deal with on a regular basis. And you're right, the news the news is always bad because people think that that's what we want to hear. Can you imagine a newscast in which the staff of the television station had said, we aren't going to tell any bad news today. We're just going to look around the city and find all the good news that we can. And this would not be difficult, of course. You can see the good news when an effort is made to present it, but that's not what we think of as news. What we think of as news are all the bad things we don't know or we need an update on. So you're right. We are inundated with a lot of negative stuff in our news, and it rubs off on all of us. I know this evening I'm going to go to the home of some friends, and we're going to have dinner, and we're going to play a game of Mexican train dominoes all evening, and we're going to have a very good time. But I can tell you for absolute sure that at some point in the evening, probably earlier rather than later, one member of our group is going to say, what do you think about this new Omicron mutation and how the numbers are going up for double vaccinated people, and and pretty soon it's going to be that each of us is going to imagine the interruption of our travel plans, maybe having to spend Christmas by ourselves. It only takes the kind of mention of these bad things to set us off in a direction that we don't really need to go in on a night of having dinner together and playing Mexican train. But these are a very natural part of our life. But I think that the easiest way to deal with negativism in the people around us is to try always to hang out with people who give you hope. Not necessarily your Susie Sunshine people, but people who, when you're with them, they in general make you feel better and not worse. And we can't always do that because maybe we need to spend time with some sad and lonely people, but most of us have the choice in our life also to hang out in some situations where we can be with the kind of people who do make us hopeful by pointing out what's positive in situations, by helping us to have fun. In my evening of dinner and playing dominoes, we can afford to talk for a few minutes about the bad news around us because we already are sitting in an environment where we can support each other and where we're going to go on and play games and eat good food together. So even the mention of bad news will not be as damaging as it would be if we just all hung out together. We didn't eat anything, we didn't play anything, and we just let the conversation go on and on and on about the terrible state of the world and what we're so afraid of and how we don't think the government is doing a good job. We already have a kind of insurance to interrupt that hopeless sort of behavior, that behavior that drives us almost into madness because of its negativity. So hang out, spend some time hanging out with people who do help you to feel hopeful. who have a cushion for helping you to feel better. And that will make a big difference for you.
Thanks, Wendy. Eric?
You mentioned, Wendy, that sometimes we have a responsibility or we have to talk to some people who don't give us hope and spend time with them, and maybe we're there to give us hope. And kind of in a similar vein, are there any situations in which hope is not the right response, where it's not going to help us to be more hopeful, and instead we kind of need to face the facts, accept the situation, and move forward without as much hope?
You know, Eric, when I first started studying hope, the big argument was going on in the medical community about false hope. Do medical people have the duty to give hope to their patients? And what about false hope? And how damaging can false hope be? These days, there's not so much talk about false hope. That was 30 years ago now, and there's more of a belief that hope of any kind can probably be helpful. It helps motivate us to go in the direction that we might want to go. That hope changes over time. It changes to be appropriate for the situation. So there's less talk about that in academic circles these days, about the harmful effects of hope. What I would say really about this is that hope changes over the course of time. So say you get a really serious illness. The first thing that you want to hope for is a cure. And so maybe before you can find a cure, you need a diagnosis. So you go off and you start looking around for a diagnosis for exactly what's wrong, and then you research the cures for that. This is a kind of hope. We're hoping just for the simple fixing of a situation. Find out what it is, get into that, and just fix it. And you know, that is really worthwhile, because quite often that can happen. And imagine if we just got sick and we didn't go to the doctor to find out what was happening. Probably that wouldn't be because we were hoping to be well. It's probably just because we aren't really doing anything active on our own behalf. We know we're sick, but we're governed by fear. The fear that something might be wrong. So we just turn away from that fear. And people say that hope and hopelessness maybe are opposites, but really fear, I think, is the biggest enemy of hope. Because when we're afraid that something might not turn out well, and we respond to that fear by turning away from the thing, by not looking at it, then we're leaving an awful lot to chance in the end. So when we first get a serious illness, we do hope to make it better, find out what it is and get a cure for it. Over time, though, facts may come into it. Maybe we keep on getting sicker no matter what the treatment was. Maybe the treatment doesn't turn out very well. Maybe there is no treatment at all. So as time goes on, our hope may change. We might stop hoping to be really well. We might start hoping to find some way to deal with the pain, or to be brave in the face of our illness. We might start hoping just to see our family or have another good holiday. So the best kind of hope, I think, is kind of dynamic, and it's directly related to what's happening. It sort of develops over time and changes. And the best way that we can help with this is to just support what kind of hope people have at any given moment. You know, if they're hoping for a cure, to just support that in whatever way you can. You don't have to rush off to Mexico with them and cash in your house or anything like that. But you could help them get information, help them ask questions of their doctor, help them maybe not to turn away from the facts that are there, but to do good research so that they can later have more of a cushion to be able to accept the facts and learn from other people, because we don't we really change over time with response to these things, and people need time to adjust. That's for sure. And but I do think it's important to learn to see when we are responding to hope, which is based in a little bit of fact, and when we're just responding to fear. Because usually when we're turning away from a really bad possibility and not looking at any of the facts that seem to be out there, usually we're turning away from the fear, and not so much following the hope. If I say, I hope the weather will be nice for my picnic, I'm imagining nice weather, all of us getting together, sun shining. If I say, I hope it won't rain on my picnic, I'm actually picturing the rain. I'm not hoping that at all. What I'm afraid of it will rain. It's my fear that's motivating that statement. So when we hope for things, we usually hope for positive things, and then we search around to see how much control we have. It's okay to hope to live through a fatal disease. It's okay to hope that the sun will shine on your picnic, but that doesn't mean we control whether it will happen. It's just something we hope for a period of time. Then we probably make some other plans at the same time too, even though we're hoping for that. That's a long answer to a very short question.
Yeah, that was pretty good, Wendy. Now I'm going to ask you a question that's slightly tangential. In everyday life, people discuss, argue, disagree, and agree sometimes and have fun together, but also sometimes have a disagreement. And sometimes some people say wrong things to somebody, and then we don't know when that person is passed away. So the question I have is that very often people ask is, how do you forgive yourself or reconcile with a regret that you have done something or said something wrong to someone and not apologized before they passed away? I know this is tangential to the
I think it's really kind of right on the topic here, because when we think of hope across a period of time, and we were talking about it in terms of younger people, but when we think of hope in terms of a longer future, the hope that we have always is that we can fix up things. We've got time to fix up things. If we make a mistake, if we choose a wrong career, if we say something mean, if a relationship isn't going well, there's always the hope out in the future that things might go better. And other people may say that even to comfort us. It may take some time to heal. But then there are these things that suddenly become part of our past, and we may have less of an ability to change them. So, if for example, my mother died and I had done some fairly mean things. One time I wrote a very unpleasant letter to her. Now, I felt quite justified at the time, but now that we can't talk about that letter anymore, and we never did really talk about it, I think that we should have had a better discussion about it, and maybe I could have apologized for doing it by terms of a letter. So we may truly have these regrets, and they might be things that we just can't go back and fix. We just can't. These regrets might even be, with relation to giving up on something, giving up on the country that we lived in, giving up on something that really mattered to us, giving up on someone that we loved, and then they married someone else. These regrets are in our past, and we can't necessarily just go back now and change them. So what is it that we can do to go forward? I think one of the best ways that we can go forward is to think, what did I do wrong there, and how can I avoid making the same mistake with other people? I know that when I really adored my granny, I loved her so much, but in later life she grew very tiresome because she had dementia, and she would ask me over and over and over again the same questions when I visited her. I would visit her and she would welcome me and hug me and give me a candy. And then she'd say, "Are you still working?" And I'd say, "Yes, I'm still working." And she'd say, "And what do you do with the kitties?" And I'd say, "Oh, they go next door to my next door neighbor." And it works out very well for all of us. They have almost got 2 families. And she'd say, "Oh, that's good." And then in a minute, she'd say, "Are you still working?" And we could have this conversation. If I was there for an hour, we might have that conversation 15 or 20 times. And so it was hard to visit her. And yet I know it was really important. And I know that by how she welcomed me when I got there and how she still remembered the names of my children. And if I could go back and do that again, I would go much more often than I went. So that is a regret that I have. But what I can do and what I do now, I can't revisit my granny, but I can visit other people who have dementia. And I've spent a lot of time doing hope sessions at the Alzheimer's Society for family caregivers, just encouraging them to stick with their loved ones and just find some ways to humor themselves. I once met a woman who just was so tired of her husband asking 100 times a day, "What day is it today? What day is it?" He would ask over and over, just like my granny would ask that question. And so she felt like she was going to have to move out from him. It was driving her so crazy. But she finally came upon a plan. So she bought a lot of calendars and she hung them all over the house. And every day when she got up, she circled the current day in bright red. She opened the newspaper to the page that had the date on it. She had digital clocks that had the date on it. When he would say, "What day is it today?" she would say to him, "Oh, just check on that calendar right above you on the wall and see." So that she had different answers to that question. And I thought how inspiring that was. And I often think of her now when I get tired of others, because my experience with my granny has shown me that I can do better. I can spend more time with others. My experience with this lady at the Alzheimer's Society has shown me how people can do that creatively without driving themselves crazy. And I think we can figure out, what kind of person do I want to be? How can I do for others what I didn't do for this person? This is one way that we can look forward to a more hopeful future for ourselves and not get so hung up on the regret.
Thanks, Wendy. Eric?
My next question to you is, again, on the kind of topic of generations and shared experiences. And we've talked about how when you're young, you have this kind of built-in hope that when I grow up, things will be better. I know that's a big part of my life. I believe it. But when you age, you can't just think that, because this is already when you've grown up. And as you get older and older, things might get worse. And that's just how life works. So I guess I'm curious, what ways is experience of loss and healing and hope similar regardless of what age you are? And how can those similarities be part of bringing us together across generations, grandchildren, grandparents, and people in the community during a time of loss?
You know, Eric, it interests me to notice how few times we ever name the feelings that we have. We show the feelings that we have, and we assume the feelings that other people have by watching what they do. But we hardly ever really name the feelings that we have. This is true of young people, middle-aged people, old people, people of different cultures, different genders. We almost never say the names of the feelings that we have. We don't say, "I'm sad." We don't say, "I'm lonely." We don't say, "I'm delighted." We say, "Oh, it's a good day. It's a bad day." But the thing that we have in common across the generations are these feelings. And I think that one of the best ways that we can relate to people who are having an entirely different experience of time. You know, young people have a lot of it in the future, older people have less of it, is to actually name the feelings that we have. Because if you at the age of 18, say, if you say to your great aunt, if you say, I am sad, you know, have you ever been sad? You're suddenly having a conversation about sadness and how that's been dealt with in the past. If you ever say to that person, I feel lonely, you know, do you ever feel lonely? Have you ever been lonely? How did you deal with that in the past? These are ways in which we can really share a common experience. No matter what age we are, we've probably experienced joy, contentment, peacefulness, humor. You know, what kinds of things make you laugh? We've probably all experienced that giggly sensation, that feeling of laughter. Interest. You know, what kind of things just take your breath away? You know, I really am fascinated by looking at the moon. You know, did you ever get fascinated by looking at the moon? It's this emotional interest in other people that brings us together and helps us to understand one another and to come together to deal with the difficulties of life. If I could give one lesson to younger and older people alike, it would be to think of the names of many feelings and to use them. You know, I was really disappointed to find that the COVID numbers were going up. That's quite different than the COVID numbers are going up. You know, I was really disappointed. Then it gives the other person a chance to talk about disappointment too. It is through our emotions, happy ones, sad ones. This is what we have in common, not necessarily our life events, but our feelings. And that is a great opening for understanding one another. And when we study people and ask them how they find hope, when I ran groups for people with chronic pain or Parkinson's disease, and we asked them where they found hope, they would always say they found hope by being with people who seemed to understand them. And how did those people seem to understand them? Because they were willing to speak directly about feelings of fear, sadness, and also about joy and discovery. So to discuss feelings, we've all got them. Every culture, every generation. We can talk about them more and gently. So it's not always, you're old, so I'm going to ask you about your feelings. We can talk about feelings together, our experience with them, and we can be closer that way.
Thanks, Wendy. Vasant?
Yeah. You know, generally people listen to your inspiring talk and read about these things and try to be hopeful, try to be positive about life. But there are times when you feel down and you find it difficult to bring up hope. So what do you do in that kind of situation? There's some days, you know, you're up and down. So what do you do when some particular day you feel down and find it very difficult to bring up hope?
Okay, well, I think that thinking about how things have turned out in the past can help a lot with this. So if you think that you don't really have much hope about the future, that your expectation is a bad one, when you're feeling down, if you try to think about times when something turned out better than you expected. Now, this is a big item for people who aren't used to it, something that turned out better than you expected. But you know, when I think now about how people in the world can't get along, I think that when I was a kid, the Berlin Wall was up, and that was an impossible thing. It couldn't possibly be solved. And we were practicing in bomb shelters. We were going home from school early to practice for some kind of atomic war. When the bell rang 3 times, bzz, 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 we weren't supposed to take our homework. Now, this is end of the world practice if you're not supposed to take your homework. We were just supposed to get our coat and boots on and go right out to our school buses, and we would be taken home early. This was a drill for leaving school in a disaster time. They were expecting something bad. And I had that all mixed up with the Berlin Wall and how it could never come down. And so we would have these terrible wars in the future. Well, you know, I was 8 then. I'm 68 now. A lot of bad things have happened around, but we haven't had an atomic war. And the citizens of Berlin, unexpectedly to me, actually took down that wall and sold it to the tourists brick by brick. This did not fix the world, but it's something that I thought was impossible that turned out to be possible. It's something that turned out way better than I expected. And I have a list now, because I've spoken so often about hope. I have a list of many, many things that turned out better than I expected. And in counseling, I always ask my clients to identify these things for me over a period of weeks in their own lives, because our history of things that turned out better than we thought they could, of impossible things that became possible, this is our hope history that we can go back. And also, there are many times in my life when I was actually okay, except I didn't know it. I was afraid that my career was never going to turn out okay. But it was going in a good direction. It's just I didn't recognize it yet. I didn't know there was hope studies. I didn't even know that was a possibility. So I was okay, but I didn't know it. There have been times when I felt really lost, and I've just thought that I can't possibly find out where I am, how to go, and then something has just occurred to solve that problem. Last night, the camera. I discovered quite by accident last night that the camera had stopped working on my laptop. And I thought, how can I do a workshop today without the camera on my laptop? I felt really panicky, but as time went on, I took a few deep breaths, and things turned out okay. I found a way through it, and camera started working again on my laptop. So, things were going to be okay then, but I just didn't know it. It's that kind of history that we turn to when we feel down. And if we're really, really depressed and we can't shake that, then maybe we need professional help. Maybe we do need an antidepressant. The biggest form of hopelessness is feeling suicidal, and that's very, very final. And if that's the case, then we should seek out the best professional help that's available wherever we are and get something done about that. But there is much that we can do when we're down. Hang out with hopeful people, think of impossible things that have become possible, things that turned out better than we expected, times when we were okay, but we didn't know it. Call up somebody who is going to care about us. These are the important things we can do. And finally, learn something. Learning a new thing is, I think, the most important thing we can do to lift our own spirits. It doesn't matter what it is. Find something to do. Find something to learn. I've tried to learn to knit. It didn't lift my spirits. But this year, I'd heard about the novels by Louise Penny, and I decided to put them all in order and read all 17 of them about the village of Three Pines, Quebec. And a lot of people talk about those books, and now I've done that. I know what they're talking about. It doesn't have to be an important thing, but learn something that will help bring you up as well.
Thanks, Wendy. Now we will turn over to our 2 guests who also have experiences, and they may have some comments to make, or they may have a question to ask. So first of all, I'll turn over to Lan. If you have any question, Lan, or if you want to make some comments.
Thank you, Wendy, that's great. And I love those questions and your answers to them. I guess one of the things that had come to my mind is sometimes it's not easy for someone to know, when they are trying to be positive and where to start. And I just wonder, where are are there any resources that people can go to just to even find out samples of some of the words you can use, and whether how you can say things to people to be hopeful, so that it will be positive and it will be a conversation starter.
There are a million conversation starters on the internet, and I know, Lan, that people are always looking for the exact right thing to say. But the most important thing is, does the thing feel good to you? Does it feel true to you? If it feels true, if it's something that you can say with the words, I believe, then it will be the right thing to say, because you can believe whatever you want and others can't take that away. So, I think of when we visit someone who is grieving, for example, if we just say to them, oh, well, you'll feel better soon, it probably doesn't even feel genuine to us. And so then it's the wrong thing to say if it doesn't feel genuine. If it doesn't feel right to you, if you feel like you couldn't defend it. If you say to them, I believe it could take quite a long time for you to feel better, or something like, I feel really sad about the loss of your husband. These are things that the other person can relate to, and you'll know they're the right thing because you can stand behind them. Don't deliver platitudes to people. Don't look on the internet for the right thing to say. If it feels right to you and it's not bossing them around, not telling them how they should be, but it feels genuine to you, then it's going to be the right thing to say.
Thank you, Wendy. That's great.
Eric?
Beryl, do you have any questions or comments for Wendy?
I'm just going to get this up. For me, I went through a period where in the last couple of months that I needed to think about the loss of my niece's husband from COVID. And then I didn't know, what did I say to her? What am I going to say with her? She lived in the United States. I'm living here. Hadn't spent a lot of time with her in the last 5 years. What do I say? And so I had a hard time dealing with that. Is there anything, Wendy, that I could have done differently than by just saying to her, Diane, I am sorry. I'll be here if you need me either way.
That's a great start. That's the best possible start. If there's one more thing you could think of that you could do at a distance, that might be something to ask, whether it would be helpful. It's hard for people who are far away. It's we don't just always know what to do or say, and we're quite distant from all that. I know from the time when my husband died, and also from when my mother died and other people, that you get these cards and they have these little messages in, and at first maybe they feel a bit trite, but then you look at them all together and you think, I am loved. People care about me. So the more that you can say that to people, I really care about you. I really love you. The more you can say that with your actions or your words, it comes even bigger than I'm sorry. When people are close by, it's easier because you can take them a cookie or send them flowers, or you can offer to go out for coffee with them. There are many things that you can just offer by way of spending time. When people are farther away, it's harder, and because you don't necessarily have the feeling. So you just have to stay in touch. Tell them what's going on in your own life. They're still interested. People who've lost someone, they don't stop caring about other people or being interested. Just share with them whatever you've got, whatever is going on with you. Just stay in touch. They may not be able to even return that very well at first. Just stay in touch. It's the best thing you can do.
Thank you.
I think definitely from my experience, what people can do the best after my dad passed away. Sometimes there's funny stories, like nowadays, it's December now as we're recording this video, and my mom's said Merry Christmas to people, and then they just look at her back because they're not really sure. Can I say Merry Christmas to somebody whose husband just died in June? And the answer is yes. Yeah. It's still Christmas. And it's, but I think people find it hard to know what to do if they haven't experienced a similar thing. And then it can make things awkward for them, and they're not sure, can I say Merry Christmas? Can I say Happy Thanksgiving? Can I say any of these things? Of course you can. Of course, we're still celebrating those holidays, and they're still an important time. And yes, this Christmas will probably be a sadder Christmas than any Christmas I've had before, but I'm still gonna say Merry Christmas, and I still want it to be a Merry Christmas as much as it can be.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so important, Eric. I think this is, as a blind person, people will say, did you see John yesterday? Then they'll go, oh, well, because then they don't think they should say, did I see John? Well, I understand perfectly what they meant. And I'll tell them whether I saw John, and it won't be, no, I didn't see John because I'm a blind person. We get very carried away with these things that we can and can't say. Being natural is the best thing. People respond with their own honesty. If you say Merry Christmas to someone and they're just too sad to feel merry, well, we can't change that. We didn't say the wrong thing. By next Christmas, they'll probably feel better. It's grieving and loss. This is a process, and we can't hit it right on. People can't just be happy on request, and we can't always tell where people are with the experience either. It's imperfect, but reaching out to people and caring about them, that's what they'll remember later when they look back at those times. They'll remember who was there for them. They'll remember who was brave enough to talk to them. They can't always acknowledge it right now, but they will remember.
I'd like to give you a big thank you, Wendy, for your inspiring talk and your insightful answers to our questions. We've learned a lot, I think, about how to have hope for ourselves and how to support hope in others, how to experience loss and how to grow no matter how old we are and how much stuff is going on in our lives. It's been a real privilege to listen and learn from you about this. And I'd like to thank Lan and Beryl for being our guests and participating in the presentation. And thank you to Vasant as well for facilitating the conversation with me. Finally, I'd like to thank the Canadian Multicultural Education Foundation for putting this project together to support seniors in our community and bring us together to talk about these important things. Thank you, everybody.